Hi everybody, it's Angela, founder of Liv Tall, and on today's episode, I am talking you through my most recent blog post where I talk about how I've created a brand that is eco-conscious and sustainable, and also sharing my tips as a shopper and how to be more sustainable and eco-friendly as a shopper and both a designer. Truth be told, it took me a really long time to write this blog post and an even longer time to get it up in front of you all, mainly because I am not a perfect person. I am not a perfect designer or a person who likes to preach and tell people how they should act. And so the main purpose of this blog post and this video is really just to share what I have learned as I've created a brand, because I've learned a lot about the fashion industry that I didn't know before. And it really has changed the way that I look at the fashion industry. It has changed the way that I shop and the brands that I choose to shop with as well. And I really believe that if everybody makes small differences, that it can make a big impact. And so I wanted to share with you not only what I do as a designer and as a brand, but ways that you can be a more eco-conscious or a more mindful shopper. So you may or may not have heard the statistic that the fashion industry is the #2 pollutant industry in the world. It is hard to actually fact check that statistic, but the truth of the matter is that the fashion industry is made up of a lot of different sectors that all contribute to being a high polluting industry. So when we hear the fashion industry is the #2 pollutant, it's not that just the manufacturers, make up the most pollution, the second most pollution in the world. It's really more about a combination of things that contribute to it. So things like carbon emissions from, factories, and also, air travel, gas emissions, things like that, that make up the carbon emission impact. But then there's also the excess material from production. So if a product, uses an X amount of fabric, there's always going to be like scraps and leftover fabric that doesn't get used and simply gets thrown away. There's also an incredibly large amount of water used in the process of making actual fabrics. And in that, there's also a lot of chemicals and dyes that get kind of drained out or washed into the water systems, which is definitely a really big problem and a really high pollutant. There's also, the use of shipping materials, so boxes and plastic and tissue and paper, tags, all of those things that go into shipping items. And then of course, there's just excess product at the end use. So that could be from a clothing retailer who made 10,000 units of an item, but only sells 7,000. There's 3,000 units that most likely just ended up in a landfill. Or on the consumer side, if we are done with a garment or it doesn't hold up or it kind of falls apart after a year or two of wearing it and we simply throw it away, that gets ended up in a landfill as well. So all of those things kind of make up the statistic that the fashion industry is the #2 pollutant. But like I said, it's really a lot of different sectors that contribute to that, not just one thing in particular. And now, as a designer and also a lover of fashion, these are things that I think about a lot, because as I did research and as I was creating this brand, those are the types of statistics and things that I learned and became more aware of than I had previously in my career, as you all know, working in retail. And so what I thought that I would share today are the things that I have learned or the things that I do as a manufacturer to cut down on my waste, to be as mindful as possible, and also things that I now do as a consumer based on what I have learned about retail, about shopping, and about the fashion industry as a whole, that maybe you can implement or maybe you can take something away from this I really do believe that there is no such thing as perfect. There's also no way that we are all going to suddenly stop buying clothing or stop loving fashion. That's certainly not happening from me. So I do feel that if we all, or if you can, me, all of us, make small changes, that's really where the biggest impact can be in making a difference for our planet, for our world. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was, as a manufacturer, the things that I do to be more eco-conscious. And as I had mentioned earlier, when I was really creating and building this brand, I really wanted to be a brand that was more about and a part of the solution rather than the problem. So I already listed off all of the problems that there are, and there are still even many more within the fashion industry. But these are some things that I'm doing to be part of the solution. The first thing that I am doing, which cuts down significantly on my brand's carbon emissions, is I am manufacturing my clothing locally. So when I was creating Liv Tall, I knew that I wanted Liv Tall to be a domestic brand, meaning I make my clothing in the United States, because I wanted more insight and more control over the manufacturing process. And I knew that keeping my manufacturing stateside, I could have that insight and that communication better than if I outsourced in most cases, right? So going back to not being perfect and not making assumptions in general, all outsourcing and all manufacturing overseas is not bad. But we just know that if you are not physically around the manufacturing process, it's a lot harder to truly know what's going on. So my local manufacturing not only gives me that insight, it's a benefit to me as a designer, but it significantly cuts down on my emissions because I am not having to ship my product back and forth overseas. I am not having to make trips to visit the factories overseas, and just overall cutting down on that travel and those carbon emissions. The second thing that I am doing is growing with my customer demand. So you've heard me use the words small batch manufacturing. And really what that means is that I am manufacturing small quantities at a time. So big retailers like, Zara, for example, or even The Gap, make tens of thousands of units per season. I am making, 10, 20, 30 units per collection at the most. And so I really am doing that. Not only does it make a little bit more sense for me financially, since I am just, one small designer, but it felt irresponsible for me to make more of something just simply so that I could drive the price down. So the reason that manufacturers make high quantities, and regardless of whether or not they sell through of something, is that the more product you make, so if you make 10 of an item versus making 10,000 of an item, the cost per item is significantly decreased the more that you make. So for large companies, it makes a lot of sense for them to make a lot of an item so that they have really, really high margins. And regardless of if they sell through the items or not, and they have 1,000 left over, they actually are still profitable in most cases because their margins were so great because of the quantities that they produced. And so as a small company and just starting out, I really wanted to be mindful of my inventory. So I didn't want to start off with 100 of a t-shirt before I even had one customer. And so that's really what small batch manufacturing means, is it means that I'm making things in small amounts. And so as my brand continues to grow, that is when I will increase my quantities. So as my demand grows, then I will grow with it, but I will not overproduce simply to cut down on my margins. One of the areas of the fashion industry that I mentioned earlier being a contributor to the pollutant statistic is all of the shipping materials, all of the packaging materials that are used to ship product to and from overseas, to and from the customer, and sometimes maybe from the customer back to the manufacturer. And so one of the things, shipping materials are inevitable. I am an online business, and so I do have to ship product across the country and internationally in some cases. But I ensure that all of the materials that I use are not only from recycled materials, but they are also recyclable themselves. So the packaging that I ship my product to is multi-use. So if I ship something to you and you have to, for whatever reason, do a return, you can use that same packaging to send it back to me. And then after it's done, I can recycle it. Same with the packaging that comes with like over the clothing. So the plastic that the clothing is actually shipped in to protect it in shipping, same thing. You can reuse it, and then also at its end life, it is recyclable. So I felt like that was something that was more or less a no-brainer for me, and something that's very easy to implement as any type of business. The fourth thing that I do is I make well-made clothes. So fashion has become very used to sort of this like throwaway culture. Fast fashion, things that are cute, things that are trendy, things that are cheap, that you don't think twice about buying because it was only $20, let's say. And how many times have we said this? And like I said, I have said this in the past too. Oh, well, I might buy this jacket. It's really cute. It's really trendy. If I only wear it twice, who cares? It was only $20, right? So we have become so accustomed to buying something to either wear for an event or buying something knowing that you're going to throw it away after 1 or 2 uses, either because you don't like it or because the quality isn't going to match up or last any longer than that. And so I make sure that I use quality materials. I also create pieces that are versatile, that are more classic and timeless in design, so that it's not something that you're going to look at in a year, 2, 3 years from now and it feel dated or you not want to pull out and wear again. I also really work hard to have high quality materials. I do not cut corners in my material cost so that I can make sure that the clothing is going to last. So it's not part of that throwaway culture where, we're going to love it for a year and then throw it away the next. The fifth thing that I do to be an eco-conscious designer is I really focus on the post-production materials or materials that are left over from either sample making or production. I wish there was a way, and maybe there will be one day, to create zero waste in clothing production. It's just not at this point possible. I've had, materials that I have sampled that, just don't work out, that I don't end up using for production. I have had some materials that we are left over with excess material, as much as we try to, be very, very strategic in the amount of fabric that I order for my production runs. But there's going to be waste, even as minimal as it is in my business, there's always going to be waste. And so there are 2 outlets that my leftovers go to so that they are just not things that end up in a trash bag and ending up in a landfill. The first thing is the manufacturer that I work with, Fabric, has a recycling program. So they actually have a program embedded in their company and in their culture to use scraps for new projects and actually leave kind of the scraps and the extra material for other designers to use and upcycle. So they are also a very, very eco-conscious company. And so it makes sense that a recycling program is just a part of who they are. So any scraps left over go directly back to my manufacturer to use. The other program that I am so happy that I found is in Northern Arizona. So you guys know that I am based in Phoenix, Arizona. And in Northern Arizona, a town called Flagstaff, there is a nonprofit called Threaded Together Arizona that is basically a community organization that teaches the trade of sewing. And they have lots of different classes, lots of different programs for their community. And so whenever I have yardage left over, so separate from the scraps that kind of get left on, let's say, the cutting room floor in production, the clothing that I have yardage left over, I take up to Flagstaff for them to use for their programs. So like I said, I wish I could have zero waste. It's not really possible, so I do my best to make sure that the extra product, the extra material that I have doesn't just get thrown away. So there you have it. Those are the things that I try to do as a designer and as a brand to be more responsible, to be more sustainable, and to be more eco-conscious. I hope you enjoyed that. And now I wanted to talk to you about the ways that I have changed as a consumer, because I am, let's face it, I am a lover of fashion. I am never going to tell somebody to stop shopping because there's no way that I would not want to shop. It brings a lot of joy to my life, and it is so much about a personal expression that I don't think we could really live without it. So there are ways, like I said before, that you can make small differences, and that's really what I have tried to do to hopefully end up making a bigger impact. One thing is that I really just don't do anymore after reading all of those statistics that I talked about and just really learning about fast fashion. I did used to be that person, like I kind of explained earlier. If you buy something, oh, it doesn't matter if you wear it once, it doesn't matter if you wear it twice, it was only $20. I definitely don't do that anymore. That would be the absolute biggest shift that I have made in my purchasing behaviors is I no longer shop fast fashion. I also no longer buy for one event, knowing that I won't wear a piece again. Because I certainly used to do that a lot, especially in my previous life where I had to attend events all the time. So it was just a fact of my life that I thankfully and fortunately don't have to do that anymore. So the first thing that I do as a shopper to be more eco-conscious is I really try to support other brands just like mine that have the same mission to be small business, small batch, and make as little of an impact on our environment as possible. And there's definitely a movement in fashion to be this way. Like I said in the beginning, I wanted to start a brand that was more a solution, part of the solution rather than the problem. And there are so many other incredible brands out there doing even far more work for the environment than I am. And it's really important to support those other brands because most likely those are all small brands like mine. And I truly appreciate and respect how difficult it is to run a business, much less a small business. And I want to support those businesses that are like-minded, like my own, because if we're not shopping those brands, then they won't survive. And that one small movement of trying to make a difference won't make a difference in the end if those businesses aren't supported. So I guess you could say I am walking the walk and not just talking the talk. The second thing that I make sure to do is if I am done with a clothing item, whether it's, a transition in lifestyle, whether it's just not my style anymore, it's been sitting in my closet, it's definitely important to donate your items or consign them, like what I say, repurposing, so that they just don't, end up in the trash. So over the last couple of years, this was a practice that I already had embedded in me, was to donate and consign instead of just throwing clothes away. The next thing that I do, and I encourage you all to do, is to really pay attention to what is called greenwashing. And so since there has been such a shift in the fashion industry to be more eco-conscious, to be more sustainable, there are buzzy words that marketing companies and big companies like to use to make it sound like they are, better for the environment, but not really making big changes to actually make an impact on their business and certainly the environment. So, just because one t-shirt in a collection, is made with a partially recycled material doesn't make it sustainable fashion or doesn't make it eco-friendly, right? So pay attention to that because a lot of brands want to use those words because it's what is really popular to say, but it's important that as a consumer, we follow up, we do a little bit of due diligence to see, is this just talk? Is this just show to appear to be focused on the environment? Or are they really making fundamental changes to be better in the long run, because that's what's the most important thing. Fourth thing that I do, and I encourage you to do as well, is to make friends with a tailor and alter your items or tailor them rather than throwing them away or donating them. So, if something's been sitting in your closet that needs a button repaired, get that button repaired so that you can bring life into a garment that you weren't using or wearing. Just another way to extend the life of a garment. I think that is a big thing because people are so used to, again, this throwaway culture of just buying a new one, but forgetting that you can actually repair something and make it new again, or make it better or alter it so that it brings life back into an item that otherwise would have been thrown away. The fifth thing that I do, and I definitely encourage you to do as well, is shop secondhand. Now, this is a tough one for us tall girls because vintage shopping or secondhand shopping still presents the same problem that we have with regular shopping, right? So what I like to do, because I don't really buy a lot of clothes secondhand, I definitely donate a lot more than I personally buy, but I do really enjoy buying vintage or secondhand accessories. So that could be like a vintage bag. I have a couple of vintage belts that I absolutely love. You've seen them actually in some of my videos that I've used, but maybe buying secondhand or consignment accessories is a fun way to buy secondhand for us tall girls, because there's really not a lot of options out there in vintage shopping. People were only shorter 50 years ago, so the odds of us finding something long enough in a vintage shop are slim to none, but we can add a really great vintage scarf to an outfit to bring life back into it. And the last thing that I do, and I touched on this at the beginning of this section of the video, is really shopping mindfully. So like I said, I no longer buy fast fashion to, buy an item that's trendy that I know I'm not going to wear again. I don't buy an outfit or an item that I know I'm not going to get a lot of use from. And what I've really, really challenged myself to do is to actually just shop my closet. So the next time that I have an event, I actually challenge myself, because my behavior used to be immediately, I have to buy something new if I'm going to an event. And, social media plays a role in that, of course, because, if you're going to an event and you're going to take a picture, heaven forbid, you're wearing the same outfit twice. But I've really, really challenged myself to shop my own closet, to kind of be my own stylist and mix and match and try new things, or try putting new outfits together that maybe I never thought of before, or really just bringing out something that I just haven't worn in a long time, rather than going to the store immediately to buy something new. And when I do shop, I'm either trying to shop small, I'm shopping with a purpose, so knowing that whatever item that I'm buying, I can get a lot of use of, or is something really versatile that I can wear with several items in my closet. That has been probably the hardest behavior shift, because I do enjoy shopping so much, but I knew that I could be better when, like I said, I was learning so much about the fashion industry. I was looking at my own behaviors and so many items in my closet that I just never wore more than once for that event. So I knew that I could be better. And now I'm really building my closet to have, high quality items, or items from other small businesses, and also items that I am making. So I'm rebuilding my closet to be a very mindful and eco-conscious closet. And I'm proud of that. So anyways. So there you have it. Those are my tips and things that I do, not only as a designer, but also as a shopper, to be more eco-conscious. I thank you so much for watching. If you are here all the way to the bitter end, thank you so much. If you have any tips or tricks that you would like to share that I didn't cover or that I didn't think of, please send me a comment. I would love to hear from you. And subscribe if you haven't already to my channel. Thank you so much again, and we'll talk to you guys all really soon.